Ew. Now, what's he just about to give us an outline?
The proposed new reservoir will be near a building currently occupied by the contractor, Mr. Alan Best, called Scar House. It will be a bold undertaking, gentlemen, a reservoir of some 2,200 million gallons capacity.
Hang on, I might not have my chairs at home, but looking at this plan of yours, it seems to me as if you're going to swallow up Hayden Car altogether.
You're right, Alderman Milner. The plan is to use Hayden Car as a source of hydroelectric power for the duration of the Scar House project. And then when Scar Reservoir is commissioned, Hayden Car will be submerged beneath the surface of Scar Reservoir.
But this Hayden Car,
Milner! In 100 years' time, people will have forgotten all about Hayden Car. Students and historians of the future will find little of it remaining. But they will remember Scar. It will be a mighty piece of work and a fitting end to our undertaking. And Leeds has got nothing like it.
So, when do we go out to contract? Or indeed, do we need to go out to contract? Well, why don't we build it by direct contract? In other words, we act as our own contractor. I mean, we've got the engineers, we've got the expertise, we know how to employ workforce. What do you think, Watson?
There's no reason at all why the corporation shouldn't undertake this work for themselves.
Do you remember when we went up to Colsterdale to see Leeds and Hannigan's reservoirs being built? They had a sort of hostel for the workers. They called it the Lesser Hotel Majestic, because they thought it was so posh. Well, we'll take Best's idea, we'll take it one stage further. We'll provide first-class accommodation for all the workers.
Aye, we're running water.
inside the houses.
Hot and cold running water inside the houses.
Proper sanitation.
Inside the houses, not out in the yard.
Proper bathrooms.
There'll be a grocer and a butcher and a theatre and a church. We'll give them every luxury possible.
And that's just what they did.
In 1919, Bradford Corporation approved an estimate of £2,161,500 for the works.
On the 14th of May, 1920, after lengthy discussion,
It was resolved to construct the works by direct labour under the direction of the waterworks engineer, Mr. Lewis Mitchell. Mr. James Watson, having sadly died in 1919. Sorry.
Well, we all have to go sometime.
work began on Scar on the 5th of October 1921, when the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of Bradford, Alderman Cady, JP, cut the first sod.
And ended on the 7th of September 1936, when, on the occasion of his 68th birthday, Alderman Sir Anthony Gady, TD JP, laid the final coping stone on the parapet and declared the reservoir open.
And that's how Bradford got its reservoirs in Nidderdale.
More visitors. I hope this is the last. Hang on a minute, you can't say it just like that.
No, there's a lot more to Scar than that's what they did, and it began in 1921 and ended in 1936.
Yeah, well, because of our reservoir, you just glossed over it.
Anyway, you've only told half a tale.
What do you mean, half a tale?
We've only heard the story from your point of view. Aye, the bosses, the corporation, the waterworks committee. What about the folks who actually built the dams with their bare hands? Who drove the tunnels through? Who laid the rails down? Who quarried the stone out of the hills? Who sweat and toil and strain helped make these plans a reality?
Steady on, Lily, steady on.
Sorry, I came over okay, hardy-ish.
You certainly do make a good point, dear ladies.
And Bradford Corporation has always been fair to its workers, so I think we should really let them have their say.
Quite right. So after a short break, we'll tell the Scar story in the words of the people who live in Scar Village.
Bradford's got its water, as was our first intent. We'll wash the woolers' hands and face until our heart's content. We got just what we wanted, and we have told our tale. And you've got lovely reservoirs up in Nidderdale. The story you have heard so far is how the dams
Everybody loved Scar. You talk to anyone that lived there and they'll tell you it was the best time of their lives. Last at Scar residents left in 1936, but they still come back to Scar.
Both Gowthwaite and Angram had been built under contract by the firm John Best & Son Limited, but Bradford Corporation Water Department decided to build Scar House Reservoir by direct labour. It was a monumental undertaking that would build the deepest dam in Europe. 1 million tonnes of rock, cement and stone put together to make a dam 1/3 of a mile wide, impounding more than 2,200 million gallons of water. And as well as the massive engineering works on site, the network of railway lines, the engineering sheds, the quarries, the explosive cement storage sheds, the locomotive sheds, the offices, the sawmills, the carpenters' shops, the smithies, and the blonding masts and wires. They built something else. They built a village.
In those days it was common for shanty towns and temporary villages to spring up around the sites of major works, and the Water Committee made a conscious effort to erect a purpose-built village to not only house their workers, but to keep them fed and amused as well. There had been a temporary village up at Angram, and some of the buildings were relocated to Scar, but Scar was built on an altogether more impressive scale. Mainly constructed of timber, these remarkable buildings provided accommodation for both single men and those with families.
The single men were housed in 10 hostels, and each hostel held 64 men, and was under the control of a landlady, who managed all aspects of running the place. The hostels were very cleverly constructed, with self-contained living quarters for the landlady and her family, single rooms for the girls who helped the landlady with cooking, serving meals, cleaning, a kitchen, a large dining room for the men, bathrooms, lavatories, and a drying room. And quite uniquely for the time, each man had a lockable cubicle to himself, and each cubicle contained a bed, a chair, and a mirror.
There were 6 bungalows in the Crescent, which provided quite posh housing for the managers and their families, and 11 pairs of semi-detached houses. As with the hostels, these all had hot and cold running water, bathrooms with baths, electric lighting provided by a power station behind the school, and inside flush toilets. This provided a remarkably high standard of living for the time. Many people in Pateley were living in 2 rooms with no bathroom, no hot water, no electricity, 1 standpipe in the yard for water, and an outside dry closet. Scar even had its own sewerage system.
Scar had its own hospital, isolation hospital, and mortuary. A resident doctor and nurse were on call, primarily for the inevitable accidents, but also for the benefit of the residents.
The school held up to 50 children, with school teachers resident on site.
There was a laundry, a bakehouse, a reading room, a canteen with a wet bar, a billiards room and tennis courts. A cinema showed silent films at first, and later talkies. It also had its own stage and dressing room, and this was used by visiting theatrical groups and concert parties. Most notably, the Pateley Bridge Operatic Society, who used to perform an annual Gilbert and Sullivan opera. A row of shops included a grocer's, run by William Morrison and Company of Bradford. There was a hairdresser's and a newsagent's, a fishmonger's, a greengrocer's, a draper's, a butcher's with its own slaughterhouse and a cobbler's. There was also a fish and chip shop, a sub-post office with a bank, and a church. A tin tabernacle, which covered most of the major denominations.
Because of its remoteness, the corporation aimed to make the village self-supporting and tried to provide everything that the workers and their families could possibly need. And this included their spiritual and moral welfare. A man called William Coplestone was appointed as missioner to look after the Scar residents, a task he undertook with great enthusiasm and dedication.
So, they built a village, but as you'll hear from the people who lived there, they didn't just build a village, they built a community.
My memories of living at Scar are really happy ones. My teenage and early 20s were as happy as anyone could wish for. We lived in a bungalow on the Crescent. It was wooden, and it had a red roof and blue ridge tiles. Shops provided everything we needed, and we were never bored. As well as entertainment that were provided for us and that which we made for ourselves, we used to spend hours just wandering hills, watching teal and curlew and sandpiper and looking for wild flowers. We just loved the peace and solitude, as well as the other moods of Scar. Air that were like a drink of cold water, thunderstorms that were awe-inspiring as thunder rumbled down valley and hills were blazed by lightning. Rain at night, it was like buckets of water being chucked at your windows. And wind at times, it was so strong it could lift a man right off his feet. We'd often sit on a still summer's night and just listen to the sound of haymaking machines, at dogs barking at gamekeeper wards, or Sammy Glencorse calling his cows home. But most of all, I remember the haunting, fluting call of the curlew, and the sound of the water over the dam wall, and of course, the bleating of the sheep. During lambing season, you could often hear plaintive sound, ewes calling out for lost lambs and lambs calling back for the mothers. We're all a bit like lost lambs, really, making our way back to Scar and those happy times.
High above on the Nidderdale moor, the sandpiper gives the alarm. The sun slips below the rim of the hill, and peace like a blanket falls down. The curlew gives his mournful cry, wheeling and circling in the sky. There's calm all around the Nidderdale dams, and the ewes are calling out to lost lambs. The dogs worry back the straggling sheep, they're urged through the gaps in the walls. Gulls settle down in their nests on the tarn, and the dogs are back at gamekeeper wolves. The wind rolls down from Dead Man's Hill, and rabbits are playing around the gill. Cows shamble back to old Farmer Sam's, and the ewes are calling out to lost lambs.